Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's public information meeting. I just want to start out by thanking everyone for their time tonight. We're here to talk about a proposed expansion to the White Rock Elementary School. And I'm going to do a very brief introductory presentation on behalf of the city, and then I'll turn it over to the applicants and their architect team to go through the project. So the application that the city has received is for a Development Variance Permit. And the permit relates to the building height, and I will allow the applicant to get into the details. But just for sort of the ground rules for tonight's presentation and meeting, the whole purpose of tonight is to inform you, the public, of the application and the details of the height relief that's being sought, to get your feedback and questions and to try and address any areas of interest or concern. It is a live event, so it is being recorded. We will post it to the city's webpage at a later date. The presentation is ultimately being given by the school district number 36 for Surrey, as well as ThinkSpace, who is the project architect. There is a Q&A button that you'll see in the margin that you can click on later on in the presentation. We're not going to publish the comments and questions until we get to the Q&A section of the meeting, but feel free to start publishing comments and questions as things come to mind, and we'll get to them after a presentation by the applicant. If any comments are rude or not related to the project, we won't publish those, so you won't see those pop up on the screen. If you do have additional comments or questions after the meeting that you'd like answered, you can send me an email. My email's on the screen there. As we get a little further on, I'll also introduce you to a digital public feedback form. So this is just an illustration of the subject property. So it's the White Rock Elementary School property, bounded by Johnston Road, Roper Avenue, and Fir Street. So you can see it highlighted in the image there. And the proposed expansion, as the project team will get to, is to the east of the existing school. It's a proposed 1,046 square meter addition to the school to allow essentially for the students that are currently occupying the portables to be housed in a more permanent space. The variance is to allow for height of 12.4 meters to the top of ridge and to 15.7 meters to the top of cupola, whereas the maximum height in the existing P1 zone is 10.7 meters. There are no other changes to the height or the other provisions of that P1 zone as it relates to yard setbacks, parking. All those standards are being met by the proposal. And I would just say that the height relief that's being sought is ultimately desired to allow for a continuation of the existing profile of the school, and I'll allow the proponents to provide more detail on that. So with that, I'll just quickly touch on the official community plan. So the subject property is designated in the official community plan institutional, which allows for institutional uses like hospitals and schools. And with that, I will turn it over to the applicant. So, and I know Dave Riley from the school district would like to say a few words. So Dave, I'll turn it over to you at this point.
Thank you, Greg. And on behalf of the district, I'd just like to thank everybody for coming out tonight. My name is Dave Riley. I'm the director of the Capital Project Office with the Surrey School District. With me tonight, I have Lana Kuriyama, also with the Capital Project Office. And then from ThinkSpace Architecture and Planning, we have Ray Wolf and Leanne Soligo, who are our project architects for this project. As Greg mentioned, this project is in response to the continued local growth in the White Rock community and ultimately our desire to move those students out of portables and into a permanent structure. We have approval from the Ministry of Education to build an 8-classroom addition. And as mentioned, our intent is to preserve and respect the existing design and character of the building. And in order to do that, we are seeking a variance to the maximum allowable height. So I'll turn it over to Leanne, who will run through the presentation for us.
Thank you, Dave, and thank you, Greg. My name is Leanne Sligo, and I'm an architect with ThinkSpace Architecture, and we're representing the School District 36 for this project. So thank you, everybody, for attending. So the project is an addition to the existing White Rock Elementary School in order to move students from 3 portables that are currently on the site. This addition is located on an area of the site that was actually prepared during the 2007 reconstruction of the school. The intent of the design is to respect the strong identity that has been created by the current school design and provide a seamless transition between the existing and the addition. Why we want a variance? In 2007, zoning for the site did not limit the height of buildings, while the current bylaw does have a 10.7 meter height limit. The existing building as it exists right now on the site is 12.4 meters to the ridge and 15.7 meters to the top of the cupola. We are seeking a 5 meter variance. This is in order to create the seamless transition between the existing and the addition. A bit of history. There's been a school on the Roper and Fir site since the early 1900s. This is a photograph from 1914 of the building that was on site at that time. By the time 2004 came around, the building that was originally there, which you can see in the top right photograph, was expanded numerous times and ultimately became a large 3-story building with pitched roofs, making the overall height over 16 meters high, not including the height of the existing cupola, which we don't actually have a dimension for. The former building was large and encompassed much of the northern part of the site. As you can see, it was quite close to the Roper Avenue property line, as well as the First Street property line. The current design for the site is quite a bit smaller than the original building, but it was always intended to be added to, and that addition has always been designated to be this white location on the east side of the existing building. The existing building and cupola are both lower than what was originally on that site circa 2004. The current 2007 school was designed to respect the character of the old school by borrowing from its design language. The massing of the building is based on the character, form, and aesthetic of the original 1914 White Rock School. In addition, the current building includes functional rooftop cupolas that pay direct homage to the former school. These cupolas provide natural ventilation for the building as part of our sustainable strategy and negate the need for large wall grills that require mechanical equipment to function. Also note the top right image, which is the existing east wall, which is essentially blank and has been made ready for the addition that we're discussing. The current site plan for the school, it was in the current site plan for the school, the original addition was always planned as designated to be in this area. This area has been made ready with servicing, been made flat. It's got tie-ins into the existing building, and the corridors all come to a point in the existing building where they can be made connected to this new addition. The scope of work for this new addition includes only the building and some additional bicycle parking. The parent drop-off, the existing parking, and other site amenities remain the same. Upon completion of the addition, there is the plan to remove 3 portables that are located in this yellow box. The intent is to restore that area to an all-weather field. The addition is actually highlighted in red in this image to show that it's essentially the same character as the existing building, an extension of that existing building. It's replicating the style and architecture. Another cupola has been added to deal with the additional relief air from the addition. Without this cupola, we will need to add large wall grills and additional mechanical equipment in the gables. On the east face of the building, rather than a blank wall, we have a glazed entry area and a landscaped and paved plaza area for the students to gather. As we look at the site section, you can see that the current school is set quite far back and down the hill from Roper. The height of the building exactly matches, the existing building exactly matches that of the proposed addition. We're not planning to go beyond the existing limits at all. This is the view analysis that was done for this addition. The upper boxes are showing a red form, which is a bylaw compliant addition, which would have a flat roof. The lower box shows the planned addition with the form and character to match the existing building. The gray line is the horizon line. In the majority of these view cases, the difference between the proposed and the bylaw compliant is relatively minor. So just to recap, the proposed addition matches exactly the existing ridge and cupola heights on the existing school. Further, the east elevation will no longer be an unadorned wall of the current building, but a glazed entry wall with a landscaped plaza area. With respect to the site profiles, because the slope of First Street, the overall building height is diminished relative to the buildings on Roper. As you can see in the profile of Roper Avenue, the height of the street is actually above the second floor level of the school, resulting in the appearance of a single-story structure. So to summarize, this project is to be built in an area of the site that was designated for this purpose in 2007. The design provides a seamless transition between the existing school and the addition, maintaining the strong visual identity that was created in 2007. In order to maintain the seamlessness of the addition, a 5-meter variance to the new height bylaw is required, which will allow us to match the heights of the existing building. Thank you. I'll pass it back to Greg.
Yes, thank you, Leanne. And before we get into the questions, I see there are a few in the Q&A bar. I'll just direct the project team to those before I start to share them. But before I get there, I just want to go back to the presentation. So hopefully everyone can now see that. So in the Q&A sort of stage of this presentation, you can see there, hopefully you can see at the top right-hand side is the little logo that looks like a comment box with the question mark. So if you want to contribute, I see we have 12 people joining us tonight. So feel free to provide your comments in that. I'll moderate the questions and I'll defer to the applicant on ones that are not directed to the city. I would just want to encourage everyone that's participating, if something comes to mind after tonight's presentation, if you go to the City of White Rock's events calendar, so whiterockcity.ca/calendar, we do have on the event details for tonight's meeting, we have a digital feedback form. So if you're interested and would like to complete a form, please do so by February 19th. I'll then share all the completed forms with the applicant and they will provide a PIM, public information meeting summary document, so a formal response to each of the comments received, and that's something that would be presented to council in a future report. You can also send questions, as I mentioned earlier, direct to me, and I'll try to get you answers either from myself as the city staff or from the applicant. So before I jump into next steps, Leanne, I do have your presentation here as well. Okay. I'll put it back up on the screen just so that if you want to refer to a page in response to questions, I can scroll over to the page. So the first question from Steve is, why not build on the west side where there's a great deal of space for building and construction equipment supplies with no obstruction to residential properties? And so I'll just scroll back to the site plan. Maybe you can speak to that, Leanne, or another member of the team.
You want me to take this, Dave? Or?
Well, I can start off just by, as Leanne mentioned a couple of times during the presentation, when the existing school was built, there was always envisioned to be an addition on the east side. All of the services, the water, the heat, the corridor, the electricity, everything is in place on that east side. to support the addition. The west side of the school is the gym, and so building an addition off of the west side would make it quite difficult and cumbersome to link that new addition back to the rest of the classrooms. Also, if we were to build on the west side, we would have to relocate the portables and the modular ahead of the construction. This way, we don't need to move those until after it's all done, and we can turn that field back over to the school.
And Dave, maybe this is another question for you, but the similar question about why not build on the south where there's ample space available?
And the answer is the same. And additionally, to the south, there is a substantial grade change. So First Street slopes off quite steeply. So building off to the south would require a lot more structure to match the existing floor levels in the building.
Next question. Sorry, Leanne, go ahead.
I was going to say, in addition to the south, you can see a yellow line on the site plan. That is all the BC Hydro and service lines that service the school. They would have to be relocated.
Next question relates to traffic flow. So will there be improvements to traffic flow? The number of cars and general commotion on First Street is confusing and dangerous.
I don't believe we currently have any work off site. That would be work undertaken by the city, I would presume.
Okay, a related question I think is just on, there's a question from Anne, is this planned for existing registered numbers or planned for future growth? And a similar question about what's the school district's projections for enrollment? I think if we're looking at traffic flows, I think the answer to this question, as I understand it, might inform kind of the expected change in traffic volumes.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. Thank you. I mean, predominantly this is to deal with the existing growth. We have, as you can see, 4 or 3 portables on site. So the intention is to get rid of those. And then there is some anticipated growth in the area over the next few years, which is where the addition comes in. So it's predominantly the on-site growth, or the existing students, but there will be some additional local students as well. It's always our hope that people will walk or ride bikes to school, but we realize that's not always possible.
Okay, there's a few questions about height, not surprisingly. Perhaps you can comment on Andrew's question. Thank you for the time and attention to this. Was an attempt made to comply with the bylaw, or was the plan to go forward with the variance? Why not build on the west side, which you've responded to, Dave, where there's a high density corridor, I guess, speaking to Johnston Street. But can you speak perhaps to the height and how it's been informed by the design or the design preference and or requirements with the building tie-ins?
And I think, and maybe Leanne, if you can help out on this one, I think, in addition to wanting to maintain the character of the building, there are some very practical reasons why we do need to exceed the height. And maybe Leanne, if you want to jump in.
Well, the existing building was built prior to the 10.7 meter limitation being imposed. And in order for us to build a facility with the same character and form as the existing building and create a school where the addition is seamless, our goal is to have this look like one unadditioned building. I mean, we want it to be continuous. We would have to match the roof line, and to match the roof line, we need a variance because of that new bylaw requirement. It can be flat, but it will not be the same. And as you can see from the view analysis, the difference in the view gained by using the flat versus the pitched is actually not as significant as you would have hoped.
Thanks, Leanne. I published a similar comment where someone was expressing concern with what they thought was the maximum height permission at 10.7 7 and what was being proposed. So it was more a comment than it was a question. Just again on the vein of height, there was a question of from Tim, have sightline analysis from the rooftop patios at 1321 First Street, just up from where you had done the presentation on Roper. So did you look at the views, I guess, from the patios on abutting property?
Yes, they were in the final sheet of view analysis. Those are the roof patios there.
Okay, so hopefully, Tim, you can see that there. So the red box is illustrating, again, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's illustrating the massing of an extension that would comply with the height requirements of the bylaw, and then on the bottom you have the proposed building shown as you sort of see the dividing line between the extended portion of the school and the existing.
Correct.
Okay, so I don't want to read into it on your behalf, but I mean, this is just demonstrating the difference between the two. You know, I would just maybe clarify for members of the public, the measurement of height is different if you do have a pitched roof versus a flat roof. So if you have a pitched roof, the measurement of height is, well, I guess it would actually largely be the same. It would be the roof top, the top of the roof pitch versus the top of a flat roof. So perhaps there isn't any benefit there.
No, but it is important to note that a flat roof has parapets around the exterior of the roof, and so the interior clear height may be different, and that is one of the considerations of the flat roof versus the pitched roof, as well as trying to maintain a constant ceiling height inside the building.
Perhaps you just on the vein of constructability, there's a question: will there be noise abatement to shield neighbors from the new east side plaza?
I think that question is related to the I don't know if that was related to construction or if it was related to the operating of the school, since it referenced the plaza. We are intending some landscaping in that area. We're not planning to put up any large, ugly noise screens. It is a congregating area for students now, so we don't really expect that the amount of student activity in that location is going to change significantly.
The next question: will there be accommodation for construction equipment and materials that will not interfere with First Street residences?
Yeah, we're working on the construction plan right now, but that is something that we're taking very seriously. We will have designated parking and delivery routes to avoid interference with the neighborhood.
A question about how this expansion may accommodate growth beyond 5 years, perhaps. So maybe you can speak to any thoughts, Dave, on future expansion opportunities at the site.
Yeah, this addition brings the site up to its capacity, which is what the intention is. It's actually the 10-year capital plan. Growth beyond that would be dealt with through boundary changes and through shifting enrollment to neighboring schools. So at this point in time, we don't have any intention of bringing back portables. Of course, that's based on current projections, and if more people move into the area, then we would have to adjust accordingly.
A comment just about adding to the west or south side is not impossible, but more difficult for some of the reasons that you've noted. Another comment: it's immaterial if the original building was built before or after the zone changes. Right, so I think Andrew's following up on his earlier question about whether or not there was ever an original design that looked at complying with the bylaw. And from the response, I guess maybe you can clarify this, Leanne or Dave. How practical or impractical is it to design an expansion that would comply with the requirements of the bylaw?
I mean, it can be done, but yeah, it would not be our preference, as it doesn't really maintain architecturally aesthetic look of the school. It would look fairly out of place with a large flat box attached to what's otherwise quite a nice looking school.
With respect to the to the classrooms, we would expect that we'll have lower ceilings on the second floor, just in order to maintain the height and get parapets within the height limit.
So definitely not ideal.
Okay, I think it might be beneficial if you can elaborate on that a bit, just with respect to the parapets. So you're saying with parapets there would be an extension into the maximum height provision of the bylaw, just for clarity of how the standard applies itself.
Well, the parapet is what we measure the height to, and for a flat roof, we would need to have the actual roof lower than the parapet height. Right, and then we have to accommodate the slopes of the flat roof in order to ensure that it drains. And because this flat building would be up against a building that's higher, there's a significant snow drifting calculation that would inform the structural design, which then makes the structure actually deeper. And then all of that starts to push the ceiling height of the second floor down.
We would also need to look at mechanical ventilation.
Yes.
Forced air ventilation, as opposed to the natural ventilation that we're looking at, which would require a bunch of mechanical equipment and some large grills somewhere on the wall of the building. I'm not quite sure where.
I want to note for those that are participating that the zoning bylaw does allow for exemptions to the height limit for things like rooftop mechanical equipment and the screening of that equipment. So if the applicants were asked to go to a flat roof design, it may be that that sort of that view that a lot of people benefit from right now, or benefit from now, would potentially be encumbered by the mechanical equipment that's currently screened in the design as presented. So I don't want to come across as advocating for one way or another, but I want the public to understand the other components of the bylaw, the zoning bylaw, that would apply themselves to the design. Again, I think Karen's asking a follow-up question, or a question that was asked earlier about can a design be done at the 10.7, and I think we've said that it could, but there are other components that would need to be considered. There's a question again about traffic, and I see we probably will have some more questions about height, but on traffic, perhaps it's an anonymous commenter speaking to school-related traffic, so not construction, but school-related traffic, and whether or not that would be compounded or affected by the expansion, both now or if there's any additional growth, if you've looked at potential impacts to traffic volumes.
Not as a result of this addition. We are expecting the students to come whether we do the addition or not. The only difference is whether they're in portables or in a built structure.
Okay, thanks, Dave. I'm just reading other comments as they come in. Question, can you use skylights instead of the cupola? Maybe you can speak to the purpose of the cupola and how it relates to potential skylights.
So the first purpose of the cupola is natural ventilation. It allows us as the relief air from the building to exit through the cupola rather than try to force it through a sidewall grill with a mechanical ventilation system. With the cupola there, yes, we have added some daylighting, which is a part of a daylighting strategy, also a part of a sustainability initiative that brings light into the corridor, and therefore we don't have to run electric lights during the day. So whether or not we would put a skylight would be secondary to dealing with the mechanical ventilation issue.
Okay. Mr. McNulty, I'm not sure I understand the comment, but that 1321 does not show the view of the bottom of the hill that is currently there. The height when seated will be directly affected. I'm not sure if Mr. McNulty wants to clarify that comment. Or if Dave or Leanne, you want to speak to it.
Not sure what it refers to. The heights were all surveyed, so we are pretty confident in the accuracy of the heights.
Question about the presentation, will it be available? So the meeting tonight is being recorded, and I will publish to the city's YouTube page a recording of tonight's public information meeting. So if you know of people that might be interested that weren't able to make it, then you can provide them a link. Again, Andrew's reiterating that efforts to seek variances should be pursued after attempts to comply with the height permissions of the bylaws. They exist. I think it's just a comment. And then another comment just about the impact to neighbors. So Karen notes it's not ideal to change the plan, but that there is an impact to neighbors as a result of the building height. So those are all the questions.
I think you're on mute, Greg.
I muted myself. I'm not sure if there's anything else you wanted to add, Dave or Leanne, about your approach to looking at the design relative to its impact on view and height. I'm happy to turn the screen back over or go to any slides that you think would help explain the approach.
I think the only comment I would offer is that this building has a very specific character, and that character was very carefully designed and detailed during that reconstruction in 2007 to develop an aesthetic that was in keeping with the city of White Rock. And our intent with the design is to continue that character with the addition, and we felt that was a very important element to this building.
Another question, maybe for Dave or Alana, is there any other school in Surrey that's positioned as close to a residential street? Reference to FIR.
Certainly there is. I don't know if I can give you an example off the top of my head, but we do work within the prescribed setbacks from the zoning bylaws, either in White Rock or in Surrey. And we're within the setbacks on this one, and we do have a number of other schools that have similar setbacks.
Yeah, and just to clarify as well, or add, the relief that's being sought is for height alone. As I mentioned earlier, all other provisions of the bylaw are being met. There's a 6 meter, 20-foot setback around all edges of the property that would be respected by the design. So I know some members of the public that I had spoken with before tonight did mention they may be a bit late. It might be worthwhile. I see we have about 30 minutes left. Leanne, would you be comfortable perhaps very briefly going back through your presentation, perhaps for the benefit of people that weren't here? I think it would be a good use of time, and then we can answer any additional questions and then wrap up.
Okay. I have to get it reset up here.
Sure, and while you're doing that, just a comment from Mr. McNulty. The blockage with the building as presented would impact views, would prefer the other side, but at the minimum to restrict to the current height of the bylaws. Again, just a comment. Okay, Leanne, I've sent your screen live.
Okay. As we had discussed, project is an addition to the existing White Rock School in order to move students from 3 portables that are currently on the site. The addition is located in an area of the site that was prepared during the 2007 reconstruction of the school, and the intent of the design is to respect the strong identity that was created during the school design, created by the current school design, and provide a seamless transition between the existing and the addition. We were looking for a variance because the original building, built in 2007, was built at a time that there was no limit on the height of the building. Currently, the bylaw has a height of 10.7. The existing building is 12.4 meters to the ridge and 15.7 meters to the top of the cupola. So we are seeking a 5-meter variance in order to create a seamless transition between the existing and the addition. As I'd indicated, there's been a school on this site at Roper and Fir since the early 1900s, and this is what we believe to be one of the original buildings, photographed in 1914. That building can be seen in the top right photograph. These are images of the facility in 2004. At that time, after a series of additions to the building, the building was a large 3-story assemblage of additions with pitched roofs, making an overall height of over 16 meters high, not including that of the existing cupola. The former building took up much of the north half of the site and was constructed quite close to both Roper Avenue and Fir Street, as you can see here. The current facility that's on site is outlined in red, and it shows how it is quite a bit smaller than that original former building. And the addition, which is this white element here, was always intended to be on the east side. The current building, including the cupola, was lower than the original building from 2004. So the 2007 current school was designed to respect the character of the old school by borrowing from the design language. The building's massing is based on the character, form, and aesthetic of the original 1914 White Rock School, and that is the character and form that we were intending to continue with this addition. The current school also includes functional rooftop cupolas that pay homage to the former school. These cupolas provide natural ventilation for the building as part of the sustainable strategy for the school board. They negate the need for large wall grills that require mechanical equipment to function. The top right image is the existing east wall, which is essentially blank and ready for the addition. The windows that you see in that are actually the continuations of the corridors for the purposes of the addition. The current site plan for the school, as drawn in 2007, included the plan addition at the east side, as you can see with the red box here. The existing service lines that we had mentioned in the Q&A period are these ones right here that go from Fir Street along the back of the school to the transformer and to service the Telus and Shaw connections. So the scope of the work for the building is the addition itself, as well as some additional bicycle parking. The parent drop-off, parking, and other site amenities are to remain the same. 3 portables are removed from the northwest, and those are in the yellow box. And the intent is to restore that area to an all-weather field. So the addition is highlighted in red, and as you can see, it replicates the style and architecture of the original building. Another cupola has been added to deal with the additional relief air from the addition. Without this cupola, we will need to add large wall grills and additional mechanical equipment in the gables. The east face of the building has a glazed entry area with a landscaped and paved plaza area for the students to gather in the morning. So as we look at the site section, you can see the current school is set quite far back and down the hill from Roper. The height of the building exactly matches the height of the addition. And the view analysis, as we stated before, the top boxes show the bylaw compliant flat roofed addition, and the lower boxes show the proposed addition that matches the architecture of the existing school. And the gray line is the horizon line, which allows you to determine sort of the view impact. I'll try and go slowly through these. Oops, sorry, I went too fast on that one. And here's the 1321 First Street patios. So just to recap, the proposed addition matches exactly the existing ridge and cupola heights of the existing school. It also matches the architecture and aesthetic of the original school. Further, the east elevation will no longer be an unadorned blank wall, but will be a glazed entry to the building. And with respect to the street profiles, you can see with the strong sloping of First Street, the overall building height is diminished relative to the buildings on Roper. And as you can see from the profile of Roper, the height of the street is actually above the second floor level, resulting in the appearance of a single-story structure. And so to summarize, the project is to be built in an area of the site that was designated for the purpose in 2007. The design provides a seamless transition between that of the existing school and the addition, and maintains a strong visual identity that was created in 2007. In order to maintain the seamlessness of this addition, a 5-meter variance is requested to the new height bylaw to allow us to match the height of the existing building. I'll pass it back to you, Greg.
I think maybe, Leanne, if you could just go back to the view analysis slides for a second, please. Mm-hmm. Greg had made a comment earlier, which I think is important and bears repeating, that the mechanical equipment and potential screening of that mechanical equipment would be in addition to the height that's shown here. And Greg, please correct me if that's not correct.
Yeah, so that's right. So the bylaw recognizes components that are exempt from the maximum height limit of the zoning bylaw. So with a flat roof design, you could end up with mechanical equipment on the roof that encumbers views, as you're showing in the illustration there, similar to perhaps what you're presenting in the preferred design, the proposed design. Just to give specifics for those that want to check the bylaw, if you look at section 4.13.4 of the bylaw, there are exemptions for things like stair towers, which aren't being proposed here, but stair towers, belfries, church spires, fairly substantial physical monuments that could be added to a building's design and have an encumbrance or an impact on views outside of the height limit that's outlined in the bylaws. So I think it probably warrants some consideration in looking at the impact of this design. Certainly a number of comments I want to make sure we get to. I'm going to publish a number of just comments, so some concern with reference to what was there before not having a bearing on what is being proposed in this application. A comment about, and I can respond to this, curious about how many development variance permits for building height are approved in the city of White Rock. I don't have the number for you, but what I can say is when we look at development variance permits, we are looking at them on a case-by-case basis. We look at the context, we look at potential things like the impact, as we've done in this case. So it's not unique, White Rock. The view is especially important. And so we have had applications for development variance permit in the city that have been approved and those that have not been approved. But every application has to be looked at it on its individual merits. Karen's mentioning why not look at the view as it exists now. Again, I think at least being able to see what the view would look like with a building that meets the bylaw versus one that's being proposed is an important consideration, but it would certainly reveal that the views as they exist now have more views to the water itself, which we know is special. Again, I'm going to publish some of the comments itself. Mr. McNulty is mentioning that HVAC and mechanical would not be 5 meters. Not sure if you want to speak to, if you have the elevation there, you want to speak to the actual difference in height that you're seeking. It's not 5 meters.
It's 5 meters to the top of the cupola.
Yes.
I think it's 2 meters to the top of the ridge line that we're looking at.
Yes. And mechanical equipment for a school is quite significant because of the air change rates that we have to provide for a school facility. So the machines are quite large, and the screening typically has to be above those units. So it won't be 5 meters, but it will be significantly high. And with respect to the stair access to it, because of the need to access the roof to change filters and such, likely it would be a stair accessing that.
Just a comment from an anonymous participant. Just looking at the trade-off between the design as presented versus the flat roof design with mechanical equipment or other projections into height, and looking at the impact of the alternative. Some questions about next steps and timing of the work itself. So maybe I'll turn it to you, Dave, just to speak to timing objectives if the project were to proceed, and then I can speak to next steps in the actual review process.
Sure, thanks. Our objective here is to begin construction this summer. We do really need to take advantage of that summer period when students aren't on the site, so that we can get some of the more impactful work done without any students around, and so we don't need to worry about endangering any student safety. So ideally we would begin this summer.
Okay, and maybe I'll share my screen, Leanne, just to get to a couple next step slides. And if any other questions come in the meantime, we'll respond to those before we conclude tonight's meeting. So hopefully everyone can see that in terms of next steps. So as I mentioned earlier at the beginning of the meeting, if we can have people that would like to provide more detailed comments in a feedback form, please complete those forms available via www.whiterockcity.ca/calendar. And then if you find the February 3rd event details for tonight's meeting, there's a link to a digital feedback form. And if you have any trouble navigating to that page, please let me know. You can send me an email, gnewman, N-E-W-M-A-N, @whiterockcity.ca, and I'll send you a direct link. So we'll look at those comments as staff, and we'll share those with the applicant to provide a formal response. We'll then prepare a draft development variance permit that would be presented to the city's Land Use and Planning Committee. If the draft permit is supported by the committee and council, we would host a formal public meeting. And for those that are wanting to express or communicate their interests direct to council, so the public meeting would be your opportunity to do that. Given the COVID circumstances, we've been having our public hearings, public meetings conducted digitally with the call-in options. So instructions on how that would be carried out would be provided both by mail to all landowners within 100 meters of the property and also in advertisements in the paper. And then lastly, if the public meeting, following the public meeting, we would present the development variance permit to council for a decision. There's a comment that's come up. Has the city assessed the reduced property value of those affected by impacts to view? If we agree that a less obstructive view has greater value, then the inverse is true. The city has not undertaken an evaluation of potential impacts to cost. That's a matter that's typically not part of consideration for land use impacts. So that's the end of the presentation. We're here for another 9 or so minutes. If there are any other questions, we're happy to take those before we conclude the meeting. I'll just put this back on the screen just so people see what we're speaking about tonight. The question here, what would be the potential date for the public meeting? So Andrew, at this point, I couldn't offer that to you. We're fairly backlogged with applications that need to go to public hearings, public meetings, so I think the earliest would likely be in April. But that's something that we're still trying to work out. Just publish a couple other comments here. There's a question here from Karen. How tall are the current ceilings in each classroom on the second floor?
I think they're actually a slope ceiling because they follow the line of the roof. So they start at about 11 feet. I think they go up to, I think it's about 14, maybe 15. It's a scissor truss. So.
Just a few more minutes for the 7 attendees that we still have in the room. If there are any other questions, and I'll just throw this back on the screen if something comes to mind after the meeting and you want to do a comment sheet or send me an email directly, here's how you can go about doing that. Okay, so seeing no other questions, I just want to thank everyone for their time tonight. And if you do have follow-ups, feel free to complete a feedback form or send me an email, and we will provide more information moving forward. Thanks very much. I appreciate your time tonight.